Amen. Anybody happy to be at church this morning? I am. I'm happy to be here. We're kicking off a brand new message series, as Abigail mentioned, and it's called IMmature or I'm Mature, depending on how you read it. But that's the whole point, is that we're all moving from immaturity to maturity. We're all growing up, hopefully. And I was thinking about that this week, of how growing old isn't the same thing as growing up. You know, you can get older, you can age, but that doesn't mean you're maturing. And so I don't want to just get older without getting better. Like I want to be better in 10 years than I am right now. I want to be more like Christ. There's a difference between a 5-year-old Christian and somebody who's a 1-year-old Christian 5 times over. You know, like you can get stuck if you aren't intentionally moving towards Jesus and allowing the Spirit to change you and transform you. I mean, mature, the word itself means to be fully developed. To be fully developed. I love that idea that we're developing into an image of Christ closer and closer. And we won't get there until we're face to face with Jesus, but we're supposed to be getting closer. We're supposed to be moving that direction. We're becoming more like him. Paul, in one of his letters, he writes to Timothy, this pastor that he's training and raising up. He's like, working out is good. He's like, but training for godliness is even better. He's like, if you're becoming more like Jesus intentionally, and I think that's so perfect and fitting as we're in the Summer of Olympics right now, like the dedication that they put into their sport and their craft, the way that they train, that intensity. Paul's like, that's good. He's like, but what if you applied that discipline to becoming more like Jesus? So we're going to talk about that. For the next 6 weeks, we're going to spend some time in the book of James talking about how to grow up spiritually, becoming more mature. James, he's the half-brother of Jesus. He hung out. Can you imagine growing up in the household with Jesus? You can't blame anything on him, right? You can't, that's one of the best parts of having a sibling is you're like, they did it. You'd be like, Jesus did it. And Mary'd be like, I don't think so. It's just, can you imagine being his half-brother? In fact, James actually didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah at first. Being up so close, but then after time and after the resurrection, he comes to that faith in Jesus, and he, almost more than anyone in the New Testament, repeats Jesus' teachings in just concise ways. If you read the Sermon on the Mount and then read the book of James, you're like, oh, there's so many parallels here. In fact, James is a short book. It's only 108 verses. 54 of them are imperatives. That just means 54 out of the 108, he's telling you what to do. He's like, hey, this is how you live it out. Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament. He's very theological. He wants to change how you think. James is like, theology is good, but you're doing something about it, right? You're living it out. It's affecting your life. You're growing up. You're becoming more mature. It's like the New Testament Proverbs. It's like this is practical wisdom for your life. So let's jump in. James Chapter 1, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. Really quick, what that means is James is writing to a specific audience. This is a letter he wrote in real time to the group of Jewish believers. So these were Jewish people who had then put their faith in Jesus, and they were spread out. They were scattered because they were persecuted for their faith. People weren't happy that they started following Jesus, and they were all spread out. And James is writing them a letter to help them live out their faith. And so he says, greetings, which is a great way to start a letter. How are you guys doing? He's writing to this group that's become a little bit more marginalized, a little bit because they had to leave their homes, a lot of them. They're spread out. They're poor. They're facing difficulty. And the first thing he writes in this letter is, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. He's writing to this group that is actively facing trials. Many of them are not in their homes anymore. Many of them are spread out. They don't have as much money as they used to have. They're being oppressed. It's not the way they want things to be. And he starts this letter encouraging these Christian believers. He says, count it all joy when you face trials of various kinds, when you meet different types of trials. Count it all joy. Count it all joy. When I learned how to count, my mom taught me with M&Ms. Anybody else learn with Cheerios or something? You're moving. It makes learning how to count so much more fun. And so that's part of why you have jelly beans on your seat, is I want us today to learn how to count. I want us to learn how to count it all joy. And jelly beans just bring a little more joy to your life. Like hopefully that puts a smile on your face as you're leaving church this morning as service ends. But I want you to learn how to count it all joy. And it's different than counting 1, 2, 3. It's different than that. It's a specific thing. I dug into Jelly Bellies a while back. Jelly Bellies are probably the best jelly bean, right? We can all pretty much agree on that. Everyone else is a far second, third, fourth. They're the best jelly bean, but it's because they go through such a process. They sell 15 billion jelly beans every year. That's so many jelly beans. That's 34 million pounds of jelly beans. You can circle the earth 5 times by lining them up. That's how many they sell every year. It's a 9-step, 2-week process to get these jelly beans. But even with that meticulous process of 9 steps spread out over 2 weeks, there's still jelly beans that don't turn out right. They're still imperfect, irregular jelly beans. And so they had this position at one point that was the jelly bean counter sorter. I don't actually know what the title was, but they would sort the beans as they were coming down the line and be like good bean, bad bean, because they wouldn't sell anything that wasn't perfect. It had to be perfect. It had to be the right shape. The flavor had to match the color. The logo had to be in the right spot. If anything was off, it got thrown away. And they were wasting millions of jelly beans. And if you're working at Jelly Belly, you're like, this is a problem. We're throwing away so many jelly beans because somebody's sitting there going, good bean, bad bean. But I think that's how we view joy. We're trying to set our life up meticulously so that we're getting as close to perfect as we can. So that moment by moment, we're curating good experiences, that joy is coming because we're trying to eliminate as many bad things from our life as possible. We want to be comfortable. Who doesn't? I don't think that's wrong. But the problem is when we stay that way, we just start discarding these moments. We don't know what to do with the bad beans, the hard moments, the trials of life that come our way. And we, like Jelly Belly, end up wasting millions of moments. We're looking for joy, but we can't do it by just creating a perfect life. There is no such thing as a perfect life. Jesus in John, he said, I've told you all this so that you may have peace in me, which we're like, yes, peace. I want that. But then he said, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. He's just telling straight to his disciples, I'm getting ready to leave, guys. I need you to know, trials, sorrows, part of life. You can expect it. He's like, but take heart, I've overcome the world. And Jelly Belly's losing so much money on beans. And I think we're losing so much when we just discard the hard moments of life, the trials, the sorrows, because we don't know what to do with them, and we're doing everything in our power to avoid them. So instead of being good bean, bad bean, good moment, bad moment, and sorting through them, they finally came up with the idea, what if we did something with all of these bad beans? What if instead of wasting millions of jelly beans, we packaged them? And so they came out with belly flops. Belly flops are just irregular jelly beans. They're something that didn't make the process. They're the flavor and the color don't match, or the logo's in the wrong spot, or there's 2 of them that are like stuck together, or they're a little bit the wrong shape. And they started packaging what wasn't perfect so that it then had a purpose. I think we need to package our moments of pain so that we can give it a good purpose. See, James is not saying that it's good that you're facing trials. He's not saying it's a good thing that's happening. He's saying count it as joy. So what happened is instead of jelly beans just having good bean, bad bean, they just now had good bean with a different purpose. They sorted it differently. And it's not because it looked good or it felt good, it's because they now had a good purpose for it. I love the idea too that they didn't just call them irregular jelly beans because nobody would buy them. They came up with a good name for it, belly flops. Because the label matters. Because the way you filter it, the way you package it is going to make a difference. And what James is trying to teach us is that not everything in your life is going to be good, but you can still count it joy. How? When you change your perspective. If you keep reading the verse, he says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." He's not saying bad things are now good. He's not saying become emotionally unhealthy. He's saying you just need to learn to filter what you're going through a different lens. He's saying you need to learn that trials serve a purpose, that hard times are part of our formation. It's part of how we become more mature. See, joy isn't just a feeling, it's also a focus. He's saying you need to learn to count it as joy. You don't have to say it's good. You don't have to say I'm so happy it happened that way. You just have to learn to see that there's a purpose to it, and that way you can count it differently. You can count it all as joy. I like this. We were talking about this a little bit the other day in the car, and we come up with really simplified ways to say this as a culture, like when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. And Judah in the car the other day, he said, there's no mistakes, there's just happy accidents. And there's this part of me that wants to fight that because I'm like, that's so simplistic. But then there's part of me that is like, that is kind of what James is saying. He's not saying the thing itself is good. He's saying it can serve a good purpose. How will you package your pain? How are you going to label the loss? How are you going to filter through it? And you're not saying that thing is good. You're just learning that it serves a good purpose. The whole reason James says you can count it joy is because it's producing steadfastness. It's producing something inside of you. I love what Warren Wiersbe said. He said, our values determine our evaluations. If we value comfort more than character, then trials will upset us. And that's it. Like, he nails it. If we value comfort more than character, there is no purpose for hard times. But if we value the material and the physical more than the spiritual, we'll not be able to count it all joy. If we live only for the present and forget about the future, the trials will make us bitter, not better. Our outlook influences our outcome. Like, if you want a joy-filled life, if you want what the Spirit of God says he produces inside of us, the fruit of the Spirit, and if you want to become more mature, you need to change the lens of how you go through hard times. It's not by saying they're easy now. It's just saying, I can see that they serve a purpose. My lens has changed. My perspective is different. I can see that I don't want to go through it, but I can go through it well. If I'm going to go through a trial, I might as well learn something. Because Jesus already said, you're going to face trials and sorrows. Going through trials is inevitable. Growing through trials is optional. We have the choice to learn from what we're going through. He continues on, and I love this too because it's like Kelly Clarkson has her own version of this, where she's like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And like Kanye said something about that too. But Friedrich Nietzsche, he's a philosopher, a German philosopher. He actually said it originally. He's like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But what's funny today, I was reading some psychology journals, and they're like, that's not true. They're like, it can, but it doesn't always. And they're like, you have to let it do something. I'm like, this is what James is saying. James is not saying it's automatically good. He's saying, count it all joy, because it's going to produce steadfastness. But then if you continue in verse 4, he says, let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. See, just going through it doesn't make you more like Jesus. And so he's like, let that perseverance, let that patience, let that steadfastness, let it have its full effect. Like, let it work in you, so that you can become more mature. That's what perfect and complete means. It's the word teleos. It just means developed, completed. It's the same word that Jesus uses when he says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. It's a call to maturity. James is like, hey, if you're going to go through hard times, you can learn to count it as joy when you realize you have the option to let it produce something inside of you, that you don't have to waste it. See, we're so used to just persevering through the hard times instead of having the perspective that this is actually doing something in me and for me. It doesn't mean the thing itself is good. It just means it's producing something good in me. Romans 8, the verse we love to talk about when others are in pain, we're like, we know that God's doing something. We're like, he's working together for those who love God in all things. He's working together for good. For those who love and are called according to his purpose. We're like, he's working it out. But we have to participate. Like, we have to let steadfastness run its course. I love that too, because at first, when you just read that first verse, it's like, count it all joy because it's producing steadfastness or patience. But patience isn't the goal itself. Patience is just the path to maturity. It's part of the way that you get there. I think so often, we talk about faith a lot. Faith is everything. Faith is how you come to Christ. Faith is how you grow in Christ. Faith is maturing. But faith automatically requires patience. Because if you already had what you were waiting for, you wouldn't need faith. So when we're saying, like, we have faith for the future that one day we'll be in eternity with Jesus, or we have faith for this thing or that thing, it requires patience. And James is teaching us, you can be happy in hard times because it's actually developing patience. It's helping you mature. And if you let that patience run its course, you become more like Jesus. And patience is an attribute of God first, and it's just something that we reflect in him. It's something the Spirit produces. Peter kind of picks up on the same idea that James does. In Peter's letter, he says, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials." Peter's actually writing to an even more persecuted group of believers under Nero who are facing tremendous opposition. And he says, "So that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." Peter's saying, you might have to go through trials, but think of it as refinement. Think of it as purifying you, as changing you. I mean, old school, if you grew up in church, you probably know the song Refiner's Fire. Right? Like, we used to sing that all the time, like, refiner's fire, my heart's one desire is to be holy, like, set apart for you, my Lord, my master, my maker. They've changed the words over time. But, like, it's such a good song, and it's just the idea that we're set apart for God, but part of that process is just letting him change us. Like, if you're removing the impurity from gold or silver, you have to put it in fire. And if we're going to not just grow old, but we're going to grow up, we have to see that there's purpose in the hard times we're going through. That they actually are forming us if we let them. That you can go through a hard time and not learn anything, or you can say, this is still hard, but at least I'm going to count it as joy because I know if I lean into it, God's going to produce something inside of me. I'm going to become more like him. He's not going to waste my pain. Because I love this because sometimes we want God to just rescue us from those painful moments. I know I do. And I love it when he does. I've experienced that. I've experienced those times where he's provided or he's healed or he's just fixed a situation. But if he did it every single time, I wouldn't be who I am today. I would be less developed than I currently am. And so although those things were painful, and I'm not necessarily calling them good, I'm just learning how to count it all joy. And saying, this is all part of the process. He's forming me into his image. It might be painful, but it can also be helpful. It might be part of how he's forming you. I love this idea because when you're going through a hard time, sometimes you're like, my life is a dumpster fire right now. Like, everything's falling apart. But, like, if we can move from thinking in dumpster fires to refiner's fires, it really changes how you walk through that. That's what James is talking about. That's how you count it all joy. Counting it all joy, when we're learning how to count, when we're learning how to grow up in maturity, isn't something we do to just pretend we're happy on the outside when everything hurts on the inside. Counting it all joy is saying, this does hurt, but it is forming me. It's not dismissing pain. It's not ignoring it. It's not becoming emotionally unhealthy. It's saying, God, you're using this as part of me growing closer to you. And because I have a different perspective, because I have a big picture, I can find joy in that. I can find joy in my formation even if I don't like the fire. I love the idea that we slowly become more like Jesus. But we need to have a new perspective. We need to let patience run its course, but we also need to pray. I love that James, after he's like, this makes you mature and complete, the very next thing he goes to is he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. James is one of my favorite books. I read it a lot. I study it a lot. It's one of the ones that I regularly go back to because it is so practical and it's been so formational in my life. And I've always loved this verse because if any of you lacks wisdom, I qualify. And then he says, let him ask God who gives generously. I'm like, let's go, generously. He doesn't just give it. He gives it generously to who? All. I'm counted in all. Without reproach, it's like, God's like, I'm not even going to shame you. He's like, if you ask for it, you can have it. And not just have it, you can have it generously. Like, this is one of the few prayers in the Bible that's like, if you pray it in faith, God will answer it. Like, there's so many things that we're like, yeah, your will be done. I want this, God. I'm asking for this. Would you do this? It seems like it would make sense to me. But this is not one of those. This is like, if you lack wisdom and you ask God and you pray in faith, like he talks about in just a second, he's like, God will answer that. We need that. I love the idea of generously. Like, it reminds me of when, Judah, our oldest, was pretty young. We would be visiting my in-laws, and for some reason, they always have whipped cream in their fridge. There was always whipped cream in their fridge. Sometimes many cans. And I'm like, what is happening? Maybe you live like that. That's not our life. We don't have whipped cream in the fridge all the time. That's like special occasions, like Thanksgiving or something. But no matter what, there was whipped cream in their fridge. And Judah he wouldn't ask me for whipped cream. He wouldn't ask Abigail for whipped cream or even Grammy. He's going straight to Gramps. Why? Because Gramps gives generously. He's going to get the most whipped cream if he asks Gramps. Gramps is going to be like, yeah, I'll put it on whatever you have. I'll squirt it straight in your mouth. Whatever you want. You're my grandson. I'm going to give you generously. But that's how God is with wisdom. He's like, if you ask me, I'm going to give you wisdom generously. I think we need wisdom when we're going through trials. We need wisdom all the time. But when we're going through a hard time, it's the easiest moment to lose perspective. It's the hardest moment to have patience. These things that we need to grow in maturity, we lose them instantly. We're like, I can't see the big picture for anything when I'm in the middle of it. I have the least amount of patience right now when I need it the most. And so you need to come to God and ask for wisdom. In fact, James is even doing a little play on words here. He's like, you'll be complete and mature, lacking nothing. In the verse before, he uses that same word for lack. He's like, but if you do lack wisdom, it's the same word. He's picking up where he left off. He's like, if you are still lacking wisdom, go to God, and he'll give it generously. But then he says, let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. We were just on Lake Michigan earlier this week, and the waves were pretty mild for Lake Michigan, but they're still big. They're still big enough that they move things around, that you need to be paying attention. And he's like, don't be like a wave that's tossed around and moved by the wind, but be steadfast, asking in faith, coming confidently to your Heavenly Father and say, God, I need wisdom. Help me see things the way you do. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded, unstable. I just love that God says when we ask, Jesus teaches to ask and seek and knock, that there's this perseverance we should have in coming before God in prayer. And, this isn't, James will sometimes just be like, this is how it is. It feels like you're getting beat up a little bit by James at times. He loves you, but he loves you enough to just be like, this is what it is. He's like, count it all joy when you're going through hard times. It's going to make you better. It's going to help you grow into maturity. And he's like, if you need help, ask for wisdom. Ask and seek and knock. Come confidently knowing he gives generously. I need wisdom for my work, for my parenting, for my decisions, for my spending, for my free time, for my planning in my relationships, and I'm sure you do too. If you lack wisdom, come to God. Solomon was son of David, an Old Testament king, has the opportunity where God says, what do you want? I mean, can you imagine if God came to you and was like, ask me for anything, what would you ask for? I don't know. I probably wouldn't have made as good a choice as Solomon, but Solomon asks for wisdom. Like, it is one of the greatest things that we can have, to see things from God's perspective. I don't know if you've ever had that moment where like you saw things one way and then you saw them differently. Maybe it was in hindsight. Like, you know the expression, hindsight's 20/20. You can be like, I can see what God was doing then. Wouldn't it be so nice, even if you didn't have the whole picture, but if you were in the middle of it and you just had the assurance, you had wisdom from God, God, you're forming me in this. I can count it all joy because I don't know what you're doing. It's not good, but I know that you're forming me through it. There's so much comfort in that. You know, knowledge is just knowing it. Wisdom is understanding and applying it. Like, there was a guy who got interviewed at the Olympics, and he said, knowledge is knowing that tomatoes are fruit. And he said, wisdom is not putting them in fruit salad. I love that. We need wisdom. Because without wisdom, we're going to waste opportunities. We're going to throw the bad beans in the trash instead of repackaging them and saying, God, would you use these in my life? Not asking God for wisdom is like having a big exam in front of you and saying, I'm not going to study. It's just like, why? Why would you not? Just like ask him. We need God to speak to us, to give us ideas, to give us promptings. We need his wisdom for everyday life. So we've got 3 P's so far: perspective, patience, prayer. And the 4th one I want to close with is found in verse 12. He said, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. He's like, you know who's blessed is when you actually live this out. When you count it joy, perseverance shows up, steadfast shows up, you stay through the trial. He's like, for when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life which God has promised to those who love him. See, it's not just for our own benefit. It's actually, like, in the moment, I mean. Like, it's not just for in the moment learning how to count joy. It's actually, like, long-term good for us. That hard moments might not come from God, but he will use them to mature you, but also to test the quality of your faith. And this isn't like a pass-fail, like, oh, that person really needs to work on their faith. This is like a strengthening test. This is almost like tool, like it's like a check-in, like you're checking the chemicals in your pool. Like, God is like, these moments allow you to see areas you need to grow in. He's like, but when you withstand, when you finish that test, when you come out still loving him, still knowing him, you receive the crown of life. Hard times are inevitable. Going through them is inevitable. Growing through them is optional. In October 9th, 1856, Spurgeon, he's one of the great preachers of all time, he was speaking to 10,000 plus people, which is so many people. But someone yelled fire, and it caused panic, and people were running, and 7 people died, and 28 people were seriously injured during his message and during his time of ministry. And it really messed with him. He was depressed. He became melancholy. He struggled. But then he eventually said this and wrote this. He said, I've learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages. I've learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages. What Spurgeon is saying so poetically is that I've learned how to count it all joy when it pushes me towards Christ. See, the mountaintops are fun. They're full of joy. They're full of promise. But the valleys are often where we grow the most. The hard times of life are fruitful for maturity. The trials we walk through. That if we, like James, can change our perspective and count it all joy, we can see this is actually pushing me not just to be more like Christ, it's actually pushing me towards Christ himself. That we can learn to kiss the wave that throws us against the rock of ages. The sooner we can learn this, the better. Like, we're going to go through stuff. It can either crush you and consume you, or it can change you. It can form you and mold you to be more like Christ. We need to learn to count it all joy. We need to learn to kiss the wave, to not run from pain. I want to be like Paul, who says this in 2 Corinthians 6. He says, our hearts ache, but we always have joy. I think sometimes we make up this dichotomy in our life that we're like, we can only have one or the other. Like we can't be happy and hold on to the pain at the same time. And Paul's like, no, look, watch me. He's like, my heart aches and I'm full of joy. James is like, you can go through a hard time and you can count it all joy when you see that it's part of the purpose of formation. Let steadfastness run its course. Ask God for wisdom. Stand the test well. I want to spend just a moment inviting anybody to follow Jesus who's not yet a follower. You can't mature as a Christian, which is the whole point of the series, is growing up in Christ. You can't mature as a Christian if you're not a Christian yet. And you're like, why would I want to follow Jesus if he's promising hard things? Well, there's going to be hard things either way. Whether you're a Christian or not, you're going to walk through painful, hard times. You might as well walk through them with Christ. And not only that, the promise that he's talking about, you'll receive the crown of life, that's eternity with him. He's saying, hey, if you can walk through these with me and you can hold on to me, at the end, you're going to be with me. So if you've never actually made that decision to follow Jesus, it's as simple as saying, I need you, Jesus. I've missed the standard you've set. I've broken your law. I've broken your rules. Would you forgive me? The way he forgives you is that he sent his son, Jesus, to live a perfect, sinless life, to die on the cross, to be raised again on the third day as a payment for us, for the mistakes we made. And if we put our faith in him, our trust in him, he makes us new. So if that's you this morning, I want to pray for you and pray with you right now. You can just pray along in your own words and your own heart. God, please forgive me for the mistakes I've made. I don't want to live life on my own. I've decided to not follow my own way. I want to follow you from this moment forward. Would your Spirit come and live inside of me? Would you make me brand new? Would you change me and help me to live for you from this day forward? In Jesus' name, amen.